Some people are on hold. I see William and Byron are on hold.
Not sure what that means. Maybe they're in
Yeah,
another
I
group.
don't, yeah, I'm not sure either. They could possibly be on the phone. I'm not understanding. This is one of my first times working with in this platform with Microsoft Groups, so
Right.
not sure what that means.
Not quite either.
Yeah, but that's okay. I mean, we're talking, so
That's right.
there you go, right?
We're here. That's right.
And as a member of the public, your concerns for these districts were, and tell me again, you are from the Mount Vernon district or?
No, I'm actually from the Lee district out here. I'm
Okay.
here in southern Fairfax County, and
Mhm.
I got it actually today. I got it and I saw it, the notification, and I was curious as to. I didn't really know why we were doing it, but I'm more clear now about I think why we're probably having the discussion to make the changes. And the only thing I'd say about it, I guess that's why we're doing it. I don't really know why we're doing it. If you're a committee member, could you explain why we're doing it or why this?
Well, in terms of the why, and this is one of the first RAC, I'm a part of this committee as a first time RAC member. So the why is a little bit before me, if that makes sense. I
Yes.
can explain the task at hand. And again, it's just to recommend possible districts or, sorry, I lost my train of thought, possible districts or precincts that could be recommended for. So again, our committee is not making a decision. We are not giving another name instead. It's just possibly looking at this criteria to recommend that these districts be considered to the board. That is it. That is it.
Okay.
Hmm. Yeah. So we're not a decision-making arm at all.
And I really don't. I guess I don't know the why. I guess based on some of the information that came out earlier, I guess, which I really didn't know as to the why. Um, in the broad brush, it doesn't. I don't know whether these are all the districts or whether are we trying to rename all the districts or just certain districts and precincts?
There were certain districts according to the criteria that was given. And when you say you got a notification, do you mind just sharing where you got a notification or who was it from?
Sure. It was actually I got it on printed all this stuff out here.
Okay.
Came from a Facebook as part of because I had signed up for the Fairfax County Facebook group or whatever, and that's when it came across, and I just happened to pick it up and look at it this afternoon and read it, and that's kind of like others. That was all I knew about it, really.
Okay. And do you know who was sponsoring that particular Facebook group? Or I'm just curious because I'm not on Facebook, so I just.
It was let's see, it's Fairfax County, and I would have gotten it off of the Fairfax group. You can join Fairfax County, and it gives you various like the communication director has one, and they come up every now and then. And then this one came up, and um, I just clicked on it, and that's all it said.
Okay. All right.
And
Thank you.
it says will not propose any new names for districts, but only make recommendations to the board of which districts should be considered for renaming. And that's basically all it says. The public is invited to attend any of these three work groups, but when they join the meeting, they will need to indicate which work group they wish to attend. and that's it. And looking at it, I thought, well, what are we doing? That was the first question I had. What are we doing, and what's the scope of it, and why are we doing it? And again, if we're doing it, I mean, I just couldn't figure out why we're doing it. And I guess these districts were picked, or these areas were picked. And I'm guessing, and I don't know. I mean, you on the committee, you probably in a better position to know why, I guess. Why were they picked? I mean, and then you have like some of the indications that during the conversation, some of the, looks like neighborhoods were maybe in the wrong area. I mean, I don't know that. But like Lee and Sully was the group that I chose, because Lee is really where I am in. And I guess Lee and Sully districts, and the precincts would be, I guess, Mosby, Holland Hall, Ravensworth, Stewart, etc. Is that how they did it?
There were, in terms of the committee making suggestions, there were places where, yes, they, based on a very loose, I shouldn't say loose, but just criteria, where if it had, and I'm trying to pull up that document. Could you hold on for 1 second?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Pam.
That's okay. No.
It is quite an evening at my home. I have, yeah. Anyway, there was a criteria set, and like I said before, this is our first work session. I don't know where the rest of our members are, but in terms of just understanding criteria for discussion on how and why the possibility of these districts being recommended with their name change. That was it. Does that make more sense?
Well, I guess my question is, how did they arrive at these? I mean, like Springfield. I mean, Springfield's kind of all by itself out there, but how did they arrive at the certain districts and precincts to be renamed? I mean, I mean, this sounds elementary, I guess, but did they just put them in a hat? I mean, how did they determine?
No, it was not put in a hat, but it was definitely looked at in terms of through historical lens. So if some had to do with possibly slavery, or some of the names had some problematic issues historically, and it wasn't just limited to that. So that's what these discussion forums are for, because we want to look at the whole breadth of history. So it's not just, oh, this is that issue and we're going to zing it. Does that make more sense?
Well, it does.
Mm-hmm.
It does, and I guess it does through a historical lens, and I certainly heard a lot from the Mount Vernon community about their opposition to it. And I guess, they make a lot of good points, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I really don't know Lee and Sully, and I'm not quite sure, frankly, what the significance of Sully is. I get the significance of Lee, but I don't get the significance of Sully. I'm not sure whether there was a Confederate general by that name or what. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then Springfield, I'm not sure why they threw Springfield in there for a rename.
Mm-hmm.
Sully, ma'am, was a plantation with slaves owned by the Lee family.
Okay. Okay. And then does anybody know about Springfield? I mean, why Springfield?
There may be other members of the community that can speak to it. I'm not one that can speak to that. I did not recommend it.
Yeah, I don't know why that got thrown in there. And I guess what we should do, or what as a member of the public, guess what? I would not be for a name change, I guess. You heard, and based on the fact that, and I think Queenie and Jim did certainly make some real good points about history cannot be changed. I mean, I certainly believe that a broad brush to try to change district and precinct names is not going to solve a if we're looking at it through the lens of the fact that it is a historical lens, and are we trying to erase, or are we trying to educate? I guess, to me that's a real important point. I mean, are we trying to erase, or are we trying to educate? And to me, I would venture to say that I'd rather educate than erase, because I think when we try to erase, we can erase, which is what discussed earlier. And I kind of certainly fall back on the earlier discussion that, where do we stop? I mean, is it a domino effect that it would be? Are we talking about renaming buildings? Are we talking renaming roads? Are we talking about renaming businesses? I mean, where are we? What does that mean? We're going to rename what?
Hello.
What's it going to be?
Hello, my name is Brian Garner. I'm a member of the RAC, and I live in the Lee District. I do want to say something to that point, if I may. I'm sorry that I'm late to this breakout. There were some technical difficulties, and I got assigned late. But a little bit about myself first is that I have a background in American history through my education, my undergrad and advanced degree. But I want to speak to this topic that came up earlier about erasing history. And I want to say that, as from my own position, this is just me speaking, I'm not for erasing history. I do believe all parts of the American story should be told. But I personally draw a conceptual difference between the names that are considered with regard to the Confederacy as contrasted with the names that are considered with regard to the Revolutionary period. And I'll tell you why. Specifically for me, this is about commemoration. And commemoration specifically of the Confederacy occurred as a backlash to the Reconstruction era and the political and social gains that shifted the balance of power. And so there was a backlash that happened, and that's when commemoration of the Confederacy was born in late 19th century, early 20th century. And so Confederate statues, Confederate names were brought forth and honored, and that type of thing. So that's where I have a conceptual difference about this process here. So it's specifically about the Confederate names. Now, for me, my focus is on Confederacy-related names, and because although this is a part of American history that should be told, what I feel is that these names should not be commemorated with streets and buildings and that type of thing. So again, I want to say I draw a conceptual difference from the history at the beginning of this country, understanding and acknowledging that yes, slavery is a stain on this nation. But I draw a distinction in what we're doing in this process with addressing the names, associated with the Confederacy, because it's a little bit different than just remembering history. It was a reassertion of a very dark part of our history to terrorize. So that's my distinction, and thank you for giving me the time.
This is Bill Bowie. I'm a part of the RAC as well from the Hunter Mill District. I'm an at-large appointee, and I couldn't have said it better than what Brian said. The naming conventions. I'm also the chairman of the Park Authority, And so we're looking at the same thing. And the naming, when you name a street, you name a park, you name any of those things, it should be a commemoration and a celebration of those people and of those events. And as Brian stated, the Confederacy and the Civil War was a very, very dark period of time, and it's not erasing history, it's actually telling history. And then when we add on to that the fact that the Board of Supervisors 4 years ago um, created the One Fairfax policy for equity across the county in making decisions in everything that we do through an equity lens, it becomes critically more important that we make these changes as necessary. And again, we're not making the changes. We're not making the recommendations on names. We're pointing out potential problems and flaws with those particular districts that we think are out there. And it's been a very robust discussion among the RAC, and now it's time to start rolling that out to the public.
Richard, your hand is up. Did you want to go ahead and speak?
I don't want to interrupt anything, but is this just kind of a free-flowing, say whatever comments you have on your mind with this? I don't want to interrupt if there's another trajectory to the conversation.
No, this is people are just speaking.
Okay. Then I do have just a couple of cents to add on this. I want to reiterate, I'm sorry I missed your name earlier, sir. U.S. history advocate and historian, and that this is all about commemoration, and I fully support that. I'm on board with most of these names, and I think so. One of the reasons I moved to Virginia is actually because I love history and I love reading and studying these things. And it always does strike me a little bit odd that some of these street names are the ones that they are. And I love touring battlefields, and it really frustrates me when I go to the crater at Petersburg, where we have this history of absolute brutality against African American soldiers. And there are all these monuments that are put up in the 1960s as ways to basically denigrate the African American community. And I think that that is very wrong. And so changing most of these names, I'm fully on board with. And I think there's room here. And I know we're not there in renaming streets, but we can talk about renaming Lee Highway to get it back to the Warrenton Turnpike, what it was originally called in the 1850s and 60s. And then it was later changed in the 60s to commemorate Robert E. Lee. The only name, and I'll just throw this out here, and it's fine if you guys disagree with this, but the only name that I think we could possibly reconsider removing from this list is Mosby, who is named after John Singleton Mosby. That, yes, he was a Confederate officer, but I think it's really important to remember that he was a little bit unique, and sometimes we don't tell his whole story. That after the war, he became a Republican, and he was General Grant's like major campaign manager in Virginia, and he became a lawyer, and he fought for slavery, and he fought against slavery and for African Americans. He became the U.S. Consul General to Hong Kong, and he's one of the people that really, really fought against the lost cause narrative that really took root. And he's kind of an example of a, quote, good Confederate who tried to reconcile the country afterwards. And I think there is some merit there in continuing to have this dialogue that if we are going to have things named after Confederates, because they're always going to exist, then they should be Confederates who defected from the Confederacy, so to speak. Kind of like Samuel Clemens, who was with the Confederacy for like 2 weeks, and then he defected over to the Union, and we give him a lot of praise for that. And I think that having that nuanced discussion is what needs to happen, that perhaps these names, we shouldn't have pictures of Mosby as a general, because the best contributions he provided in his life were later, when he went on to support U.S. Grant and help him run for office and help him win Virginia. And I think there is some merit on that. As for the rest of the names on the list, I don't know enough about them, or I do know enough to think that, yeah, it's worth renaming a lot of those streets.
If I may jump back in, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name who was just speaking. But yes, I do agree with you on the nuance with Mosby. I did my own research and saw that too, that a closer look is warranted as far as, you know, his trajectory. I did see the information that you read out, and did notice, you know, the change. And in fact, from my notes, it looks like he only owned like one slave, but actually, you know, there's some different history with that.
And he vehemently hated slavery, and he talks
Yeah,
about this a lot.
he did. My issue, I guess, my sticking point is that he did, you know, out of a sense of what he called patriotism, you know, he still fought for his state. But, you know, look, I'm a student of history, and again, I reiterate, I'm not about erasing history, and I do especially understand the nuances of, you know, of each of these individuals. So yeah, I would, you know, personally, I would be willing to just kind of relook at, you know, Mosby in particular, but the rest of the names, I agree. Um, you know, that they remained loyal to the Confederacy, and they remained loyal even after the war. So therefore, it's more about what I was saying before about how they are commemorated, what the intent of that commemoration was, and the effect on the community then and the community now. So that's the position I present to the table.
Pam, I see your hand up again, or did you want to speak again?
Yes, I do. I certainly understand, and I certainly agree that you know, we should certainly not honor and the principles of the war, of the Civil War. But the only contention that I really see is I am concerned that I'm a history buff, but I'm certainly not an expert. But it comes from a lay perspective, and I get that that it was wrong, and I do not think that certainly, you know, the atrocities that occurred were wrong, and but I also am fearful. I'll say it like this: I'm fearful that I don't want us to. I get it that we don't want to necessarily honor or raise up certain individuals because of the names of the streets or the highways or whatever. But I certainly don't want, what I want to see as a citizen out here is the fact that we continue to tell the story, the true story, and the true events that happened. And I'm just concerned as a citizen that I don't want to see that overshadowed by name changes to say they were wrong during the course of history, which we know they were. And the only other comment that I would make would be that do we, and I know this is probably not what the committee is supposed to do, is to look at where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Are we talking about a district name? Are we talking about a park name? Are we talking, where does it go from here? I think the gentleman, Paul, that was talking about, he didn't mind if we renamed everything. Is that where we're going with this? And is that the right thing we should do?
Pam, hi, Stephen here, longtime resident. And I hope that's not where we're going. I think like many of the people have spoken to this breakout meeting in the original, I'm a huge history buff. And it kind of worries me that, you know, I think Brian and William was really articulate with their point of making a distinction between kind of modern era renaming and gold plating of the Confederacy, which happened across the South with statues and renaming streets and districts and counties and all this stuff, with the idea of stripping out anything that related to our revolutionary past. And I think we are a colonial county. We have that history. And it was kind of shocking to hear statements like that for me, when I think no one, or very, say, a minority of people in this county want to erase everything and kind of start from scratch. And I think the big difference is, of course, that the Confederacy offered nothing to our history. It was destruction, it was death, and it did no good. Whereas the Revolution, we can see these people who were deeply flawed, but at least acknowledge their great contributions, which laid the founding laystones for where we are now. And so I guess I appreciate that it seems like this working group for Lee and Sully is about kind of scrubbing out Confederacy and its naming and gold plating in our community from past generations. At the same time, I can also point out that if that's truly what this entire larger speaking RAC initiative and redistricting is about, then why is Mount Vernon and Gunston, why are their precincts under, review? And I think there is a resonance there where I see, okay, we're talking about it being about this, but it's not really the case when we talk about our entire county. And I think that is what really concerns me as a product of this county. I went to school here, was raised here, now I live here. That we're kind of missing the point when we, having things named these people, it does create a living history. It creates a history we discuss, both in class and you just Google it, you're like, who is this person? And I do think there's something lost when we hide it, even for people who did a lot of good as much as they did a lot of evil, which I think even modern politicians are guilty of as well. That's all I wanted to say.
If I can jump in just to add a little bit more nuance to that as well, I think there is a lot of merit to changing names of streets and districts to kind of get rid of that commemorative aspect. But there are a few, unfortunately, there are historical landmarks that we probably should not change the name of. So like the Sully Plantation should probably still be the Sully Plantation, or Sully Ford is really pivotal to the First Battle of Manassas because where McDowell does his flanking movement to go through the ford, and so we have to leave the name of the ford. Just from a historical and archaeological perspective, recently I was trying to find Blackburn Ford, and it was very, very difficult to find, but because the name was still the same from the Civil War, I was able to track that down. And so I think that we can't change some of those really small nuances, but it is meritorious to change the names of like streets and districts.
George?
Yes, thanks everyone for letting me come in a little late to this.
Yes.
Question I have, give me a recap if there anything, when Frank Anderson spoke today, public comment, he was concerned about the two Braddock residents not being in this meeting. So I'm just trying to trying to fulfill those duties for that request. Is anything been talked about concerning the Ravensworth precinct?
No.
Or how it relates to your discussion that you've had between the Lee and Sully things. I'm just trying to relate it, make sure we haven't missed anything. And if other groups have done recommendations, and I just don't want there to be a recommendation on Ravensworth without me and the Braddock rep here for that discussion or that decision.
If I can jump in, George, this is Brian from Lee District. What we talked about in general was just, it seems that most of the conversation has been around just a conceptual difference between periods. So we talked about names associated with the Confederacy. It's clear that commemorating them presents a challenge, and that's something to consider. But that this process is not about erasing all history, because history should be told. This is the history of all of us, and it should be told, and we should remember it. There is a conceptual difference between the Confederacy and then the Revolutionary period. Just, I will say personally, from my perspective, I don't consider this process being clear about what the intent is. I believe that the intent is to look at these names, but we should. I think that we intend to focus on names that are more associated with the Confederacy.
Thank you.
Of which Ravensworth would be a part of that.
Correct. I mean, I guess I'm hearing from you, there's no recommendations yet. The other two are coming out with a recommendation. So that was pretty much my big thing. Next time, I promise this will be the first and main group that I'll be on.
No recommendations we're just trying to come to an understanding on just what the intent of this process is.
We're still missing a number of our RAC members on here. Yeah,
I was noticing that too, Bill. I said,
I don't see Richard. There's a few people I don't see that haven't been a part of this conversation at all.
Hey, sorry I joined late, guys. This is Prashant. George and I were in the Springfield group, and I think, George, you already mentioned the Ravensworth point.
Pretty much they're not making any recommendations tonight, just trying to see where people felt and then time differences. So there still looks like they're going to have a second meeting compared to the Springfield one that was coming out with the recommendation. So we have time to join in next time too.
Okay, great. I just want to confirm that.
Just curious, what type of recommendations is Springfield coming up with?
That was my question.
Oh, nothing. This is Prashant from that working group. Nothing at all. I think at this time, it's just that we want to. We didn't have one of the Springfield rep on our committee. She wasn't in attendance today. So I think we want to hear from her, and then also to solicit local opinion, local outreach, which we haven't got. Yeah, so basically nothing at this time, and we were missing a few members as well today.
Well, if we have time and someone wants to speak to it, I'm actually not familiar with all of our, I guess, precinct names here and their Confederate connection, but is that true for all of these?
Some are Confederate and some are slave owners.
This is Leo Milanowski speaking from Holland Hall. Holland Hall was George Mason's northern plantation adjacent to the Mount Vernon plantation, and has been owned by a myriad of owners after that. So Holland Hall is not it is associated with George Mason, but not associated with the Confederacy.
Got you. Thank you.
And Stephen, my question too is Springfield. Why was it chosen? What was the intent of placing Springfield? Was it because it was?
I think that one of the issues around Springfield was just the geographic designation, because half of Springfield half of the Springfield district is not actually in Springfield. And so there was a discussion around having a clear delineation of that particular geographic area.
Yeah, that was correct, Bill. It's pretty much the geographic criteria aspect of things.
So I guess I'm going to ask the question as I kind of set up for it. What is the general gist then of this group currently with regards to namings which are directly led to the Confederacy versus the namings which are more historic, which would include slave owners like Hall and Hall?
I'll speak up here. My personal opinion, I think, as I've expressed, is I draw a conceptual difference. My primary issue, my issue in its entirety, are the names that are commemorated, that are associated with the Confederacy. I am not for changing all of history, and so names that are from the Revolutionary era, specifically Mount Vernon, George Washington, Holland Hall. I'm not for changing them. I would not vote for that. So that's my personal opinion.
I would back that up.
I'm pretty much of the same opinion as Brian is, I think that makes the most sense. And in my perfect world, all 9 districts wouldn't be named after anybody. They would all be geographic designations: North Fairfax, South Fairfax, Central, West, whatever. And that takes all the mystery out of it, because anytime you name something, believe me, I've been going through this for 30 years. Anytime you name this after somebody, you better make damn well sure you have all of the history with that person or that thing that you're naming it after, or else it's going to come back to bite you. And the other thing, I'm a student of history also, and I've looked, and there's not a single street or a single historic monument or anything named after anybody in Japan, in Germany, in Italy. It's against the law. It's flat out against the law. And my feeling in terms of the Confederacy is just that they should be eliminated and the history should be told fully.
Bill, sounds like an ordinance there.
I'll step up to that, George.
I had a question about the district, and I'm sorry I joined a little bit late, so it might have already been covered. Just to clarify, if that name came from the Confederate leader Lee or a slave owner. And the only reason I ask this is because I attended a talk from a Lee district event that concluded that they don't know who Lee district was named for.
Speaking to that point, yes, you're right. I try to look into that, and then we've had one of our members serve on a committee prior to this that looked into the history. It's inconclusive right now, if it's associated specifically with the Robert E. Lee family directly. But I think in that situation, in this particular situation, we're dealing with a perception issue as well. Living here in Northern Virginia and dealing with the topic that we're dealing with, there's a challenge. We would either have to make sure or know for sure that it is definitively not associated with that family, or we deal with a perception issue. If we're addressing all these other names and all these other issues, then the question will come up, okay, well, why didn't you take a look at this name? So yeah, granted that it's rather inconclusive, but I believe it still remains something that we should, as a community, look at.
Brian has my vote. I like his perspectives. Go forth, Brian. You have my blessing.
I think one thing too that I thought it was going to be in this meeting, but I guess not. We're trying to bring in, this is just an overall comment. This isn't just for this group. The historical commissioners from each district. So if there's any questions on the history and all of that, isn't, George's point of view, George's interpretation. So that's where we're also trying to get that mentioned that people also had questions to.
If I can chime in, I agree with a lot with what Brian said, kind of that delineation between Revolutionary and Civil War era. And I've already made my point on the nuance around Molesby specifically, but when we're talking about Lee, Stewart, Van Dorm, Penderbrook, I think those are all good names to replace. To the point on Lee's Corner and how we have ambiguity there with that. And I think we see this with a lot of Lees out there because Lee was a relatively common name, like Leesburg itself, but we know Leesburg existed prior to Robert E. Lee. But I think an important perspective to have is this is a really good educational opportunity for Fairfax County, that whatever the verdicts are on these, on some of them to come out and say, hey, we changed it because this is what we learned in the process. But if it comes out that Lee's Corner is named after, I don't know, White Horse Harry Lee, a Revolutionary era, and they're trying to honor him, or a different Lee that I can't think of right now. This would be a good opportunity for Fairfax County to put a plaque up, this is what it's named after, or to roll out some sort of educational campaign explaining who it's named after. Because I think if we go down the road of anything named Lee, we need to get rid of, it might be problematic just because there are so many other Lees in history and out there, and there's different variations in spelling and things like that. Just another comment on that.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Is this the breakout room for Sully and Lee?
Yeah, we've been here the entire time, Sam.
And I could hear you, but it was really frustrating because people were asking questions I had answers for, but you couldn't hear me. I couldn't see you. It was just very frustrating. But I was able to go back out and go back in, and we're, I guess, supposed to go back to the main meeting by now, right? Or do you know?
Well, we just got an announcement that the breakout rooms are going to be closing up here shortly.
Okay, then sorry for the technical screw up, because it was very frustrating hearing you folks talk without being able to join you.
We'll get it the next time.
I know.
We will have more meetings. Please do come back.
Oh, you betcha. You betcha. And I did hear your eloquent words about what you were interested in attacking or addressing and what and not. I think that was appropriate. I've done some research on Sully, and yeah, it was a plantation with over 85 slaves, and it did migrate to I want to say Quaker